The summer after the lantern night, the orchard learned the names of more children. A dozen schools signed up for monthly visits. The bus drivers knew to stop by the gate where the brass sign read Just Roots Foundation, and underneath, in smaller letters, be seen, be kind, be brave. Word of mouth did heavy lifting. A video of Sophia teaching a chaotic class of 9-year-olds how to chiffonade basil without losing fingers racked up 2 million views because the caption read, POV, your chef is a 10-year-old menace to parsley. In it, Sophia told the camera with comically solemn eyes, knife skills are like boundaries. Point the sharp parts away from yourself. The comments were a field of crying, laughing emojis and parents begging for a full series. Adrian didn't love that the world could come roaring into his home with a swipe, but he had learned that sometimes virality was not an infection, it was a wildfire that cleared old rot. The donors certainly thought so. The foundation hit benchmarks faster than his most aggressive projections. It was an odd joy sowing spreadsheets to soil and finding both bore fruit. 3 months into summer, a different kind of letter arrived, heavy paper, congressional seal, an invitation disguised as a summons. The Senate Subcommittee on Organized Crime and Human Trafficking wanted testimony. Reyes called, voice light with the tension only other cops could hear. This is good, she said. It's also a circus. Bring comfortable shoes and a spine. Do you think they're ready to hear the truth? Adrian asked. Reyes made a sound like she was unscrewing a jar. They're ready to be seen hearing it. Nova sat cross-legged on the kitchen island, swinging a sneakered foot, reading the letter upside down. You mean C-SPAN, but make it trauma? She said. Exactly that, Reyes said dryly. Bring receipts. Elijah walked in with an external hard drive the size of a sandwich and placed it on the table like a communion wafer. Receipts, he said, backed up thrice, encrypted, color-coded. I also made you a slide that turns into a butterfly at the end, Sophia gasped. But like ethically, like Adobe, Elijah said. Jasmine watched from her corner of the kitchen, sketchbook open, drawing little senators with mouths that turned into zippers. Do we have to go? She asked. No, Adrian said, gentle but firm. You get to go if you choose. If you don't, that's okay. This is not a price you pay to deserve help. Jasmine looked relieved. Nova looked torn then hard. I'll go, she said. On my terms. On your terms, Adrian echoed. They went to D.C. in clothes that said, we respect the building, and shoes that said, we run if we have to. The marble hallways were cold the way money is cold. Staffers glanced up at them with bright smiles that didn't reach all the way and clipboards that did. The hearing could have been theater if the stakes hadn't been blood. The senators introduced themselves with practiced empathy and 5-minute mini-speeches designed to go viral as sound baths of righteousness. Adrian spoke first, told a compressed version of a long story. He used we more than I. When he quoted Eleanor Compassion, seed, harvest, the room stilled, like even the marble was listening. Reyes followed, clinical without cruelty, a surgeon describing a tumor with the care of someone who had seen too many, and Nova. She adjusted the microphone and looked like she wanted to kick it. She didn't read, she spoke. I'm not here because I like rooms where people perform caring, she said, and several senators flinched under smiles. I'm here because people like me don't get microphones unless someone else holds them. She told them about nights inside the library window that didn't lock, about the boiler room behind St. Luke's and the hospital benches that hummed at midnight, about how grown-ups could walk past a small girl like she was an optical illusion. The stenographer blinked more than the average amount, which is how you could tell the truth had found a way into the room. One senator, young, new, eager, asked, "What can we do?" "What would have helped you most?" "Believe me," Nova said. "Not now then." #BelieveYou're trended before their Uber reached the hotel. That night in the hotel room with two queens crammed into a space that had seen too many sad conventions. They ordered room service grilled cheese, because tradition matters, and watched a reporter replay a clip of Nova saying, "Believe me." The network had captioned it in big captions, like it was a lyric. Nova groaned. "I sound like a t-shirt." "You are a t-shirt," Sophia said. "I want 3. Jasmine drew the t-shirt bold serif font, little butterfly tucked into the dot over an eye. She colored it with the tiny hotel pencil that always broke. And then with a highlighter she stole from Adrian's folder when he wasn't looking. She handed it to Nova. "If they're going to make it a thing," Jasmine said, "we might as well make it a good thing." "Back home?" The good things multiplied. The Just Roots garden at the community center produced its first serious harvest. Baskets of radishes, lettuce, tomatoes, and herbs, assembled by kids who learned to own phrases like, "We grew this with their bodies." A local chef with too many tattoos and exactly the right number of opinions volunteered to build a cooking curriculum with Sophia. He taught them how to make salsa 3 ways and how to talk kindly to onions. Sophia, who could boss a kitchen like a general, met her match and loved it. Not all of it was montage. A donor pulled out after a board member complained about politicizing vegetables. Someone graffitied the foundation sign with a slur that kids had to learn didn't belong to them. Adrian cleaned it himself, scrubbing until his shoulders shook, because anger isn't useful unless it builds calluses where you need them. And then, prison. Specifically the women's correctional facility 2 hours south, where Celeste Marlowe wore beige and Botox fatigue. Her lawyers filed another appeal. The judge swatted it away like a persistent gnat. Celeste pivoted. She made herself queen of laundry. She hustled. She learned the currency of dignity in a place designed to bankrupt it. And when hustlers hustle, they find phones. On a Tuesday morning, bright as disinfectant, Elijah showed up with a laptop and face like a thunderclap. He spun it around. Deem Ms. Rumors. A set of burner accounts sprouting from a single IP range near the prison's laundry wing. The messages were baited hook stories tipped with arsenic. Not just denial. Counter-narratives. Whisper campaigns that said Nova was a grifter, that Reyes planted evidence, that Just Roots was a money-laundering front for Adrian's rebranding. Celeste, Adrian said, the syllables simmering. She's orchestrating, Elijah said, from inside. Reyes pinched the bridge of her nose. Of course she is. You can smuggle a phone into a paper bag these days. We'll take it to the warden. In the meantime, lock the hatches. They locked. The Foundation spent a week playing whack-a-mole with lies. They didn't just deny. They posted receipts, public filings, transparent budgets, videos of kids planting peas with hands too busy to launder anything but soil. It worked, mostly. The internet is a creature that eats narratives. If you feed it truth fast enough, sometimes it looks up. It's them Briggs. In a federal transfer to another facility for his own safety, a phrase that can contain a world someone miscounted, or missigned, or missaw. The van took a wrong exit onto a county road that didn't have cameras yet. When the escort vehicles reached the fork, they argued with each other instead of following. By the time they figured it out, the van was 30 minutes and a shaved padlock ahead. Reyes called with words that tasted like battery acid. "He's out," she said. "Jesus," Adrian whispered. He looked instinctively at the window that framed the orchard like a painting of a place where bad things didn't happen. "We need to. I'm already here," Reyes said. Her voice changed registers. "Listen to me. Tighten the perimeter. Nova and the girls don't move without escort. I'm spinning up a bolo and every favor I'm owed." Elijah threw himself into the network. He massaged traffic cameras like they had sore calves, teased plate readers, threaded cell pings. Briggs had friends. You could tell by the holes in the net. "He's headed north," Elijah said. "He doesn't have money for long. He'll need a supply point." "Celeste," Nova said. "She has phones. She has fans. She has debt," Reyes said flatly. "Briggs's debt. She can't pay it, so she will try to transfer it. We need to cut the wire." They did it old school. A raid on the laundry wing with a warden who had learned. The humiliation of being outmaneuvered by a woman in beige. They found 3 phones, 2 chargers, made from parts that used to be a radio and a toothbrush, and a handwritten list of usernames in pencil under a mattress. Celeste smiled in a way that made ugliness theatrical. "Hello, Olivia," she said, like greeting a brunch guest. "Did you bring croissants?" "You're done," Reyes said. Again, Celeste shrugged. "I live for sequels." It would have been funny if not for the man in a stolen truck, driving towards Seattle like a dog with a map to a butcheress. The festival was in 2 days. Just Roots' second annual Seeds of Voices. Canceling would send a message. Not canceling would send another. Adrian stared at the options with the kind of headache that makes you wish you could temporarily outsource your skull. Nova watched him, then said, "We do it." "It's risky," he said. "So is telling the truth," she answered. "If he's going to come, he'll come whether we hand out marigold seedlings or not. At least this way we'll be ready." They made ready. Security doubled, then doubled again. Reyes borrowed tactical teams from friends who owed her birthdays. The local police did that chest-forward thing men with flashlights love. Adrian signed a stack of insurance riders and then put a hand on Stella, the oldest apple tree, like he could ask it for advice. The tree said nothing, which he decided to interpret as a vote of confidence. The day bloomed with children and banners and chalk art that announced, "This is our garden," in letters as big as the space would allow. Sophia wore an apron that said Knife Coach and bossed a cooking demo like a tiny celebrity. Jasmine had an art tent where kids made memory maps with crayons and string. Nova McD with an energy that turned nerves into theater. Adrian did what he did best, made eye contact with donors until they forgot to be cynical. He didn't see the truck until the screaming started. It came in hot and crooked, jumped the curb near the rear gate, chewed a strip of grass, and fishtailed to a stop that sent dirt and fear into the air. The door opened and Briggs spilled out thicker, beard scrub like wire, eyes feral and hungry. Held a gun like it was his identity. There is a choreography that happens when a crowd meets terror. It is not random. It is the math of survival. Parents dove. Staffers shoved kids under tables. Reyes moved like a blade. She saw the line, the angles, the places where shots would find flesh, and where they would find nothing but air. Briggs waved the gun in a figure eight at the line of bodies who had turned themselves into a wall. "Come out," he yelled. "Come out, you little hero. Let's see if they believe you now." Nova stood. Every atom in Adrian's body tried to stop her, and every atom failed. She stepped forward into an open space that became a stage. "I'm here," she said. Her voice didn't shake. Her hands did. She lifted them slow. "What do you want, Quiet?" Briggs said. "Obedience?" He grinned with broken teeth. "You put a good man in a cage, you and your boyfriend, the cop," Detective Reyes said calmly, still moving, reading the ground for cover like Braille. Something flickered at the edge of the chaos. Jasmine, not where she should be. Low and moving along the side of the truck with a sketchbook like a shield and a pencil like a ritual. Adrian's heart tried to evacuate. He couldn't call her without drawing a line between a barrel and a daughter. "Put the gun down," Nova said. "We can talk." Briggs laughed. "We're past talk." He stepped closer. Everything in the world shrank to a circle the width of his reach. "Here's how this goes," he said. "You walk with me and I don't paint the grass with salsa," Sophia yelled, hurling a stainless steel bowl like a comet. It struck Briggs in the ear with the kind of splat usually reserved for slapstick TV. The crowd gasped. He turned furious and bleeding red and green. "Run," Reyes screamed, and 1,000 decisions happened at once. She fired. Briggs fired. The picnic table broke a fall. A lantern shattered on stone. Jasmine dropped to the ground and pushed her sketchbook under the truck's tire, then rolled the other way, braid whipping. Ow. Nova didn't run. She moved faster than Adrian had seen her move, except for the night she ran after a car. She closed the distance as Briggs wiped salsa from his eye and hit his wrist with the heel of her hand. The way Reyes had taught her in a kitchen, on a quiet afternoon, a lesson disguised as a game. The gun hit the grass. Elijah, who to that point had been tech support with feelings, launched himself like a particularly articulate linebacker. He and Briggs slammed into the truck door. Reyes reached the gun. Her boot sent it skittering beneath a table. Briggs bucked, twisting, reaching for anything that could be a weapon, and found a gardening trowel. He stabbed the air, slashing skin that didn't deserve it. Elijah took a cut across the forearm and didn't let go. Reyes got an arm around Briggs's neck. Adrian grabbed his legs. For 3 seconds, they were a machine built from terror and training and love for children. Then Briggs went slack and conscious, not dead, which felt adult and terrible and right. Silence swallowed the field, then returned the sound of crying, of radios. Of 1,000 panting lungs discovering again how to breathe. The kids watched with eyes as big as their faces. Mary, who had pulled 12 children under a tablecloth like a magician hiding rabbits, emerged, primly smudged and furious. She walked to Sophia, took her sticky face in both hands, and said, "Your aim is terrible, and I'm proud of you." Then hugged her so hard, Sophia squeaked. Paramedics swarmed. Police performed their theater. Reyes leaned against a tree, chest heaving, and closed her eyes for the amount of time it takes to forgive a world and then start fighting it again. Elijah sat on the grass, looked at his own blood with scientific curiosity, and said, "Huh." Jasmine fished her sketchbook from under the truck and opened to a page she had somehow completed in panic. The moment of the throw, a bowl arcing a crowd bent like grass in wind, a small girl's body a line of light. She held it up.
"Oh, we're okay,"
she said, as if it had the power to make it true. It did. The news ate the footage in 6 bites and burped up headlines. Kid chef foils attacker with salsa, one read, which made Sophia deeply, specifically insufferable for 3 days. "I am a hero," she reminded everyone, in the tone of a person who expects a parade and will accept a cake. Behind the memes, the gravity grew roots. Briggs was booked under 1,000 charges. 2 officers, shaken enough to tell the truth before the union could coach them, admitted to the transfer mistake. The warden resigned. Phones were scraped out of the laundry like barnacles. Celeste's prison privileges evaporated. The public, which had flirted with scandal fatigue, found a story that came with a recipe and a moral and decided not to look away. The festival resumed on the second day because stubbornness can be righteous. They moved the cooking demo away from the gate and hung a sign that said, "We don't negotiate with cilantro." The kids came back. Parents came, too, glancing at the gate and then choosing joy. In the deep of that night, the house finally quiet. Nova sat on the back steps with a blanket and a paper bowl of leftover corn. She stared at the orchard, the lanterns unlit, the sky like a bruise healing to yellow. Adrian sat beside her. "I wanted to stop you," he said. "I know," she said. "I am not sure I could have." "I know that, too." He nodded. "You did something reckless and brave and right. I also almost got a bunch of people hurt. That man brought hurt with him. He didn't invite it. He redirected it." She didn't say anything for a while. Then when I saw him, I thought my legs would freeze. But then I thought about Sophia and Jasmine and all those kids. And then the part of my brain that's been busy since I was 9 did the thing it does. "What thing?" "It made a plan," she said. "It always makes a plan." He scrubbed his face. "We need to teach you a plan that involves letting other people throw the salsa." She snorted. "Deal." He hesitated, then said, "There's something else." She turned. "What?" He exhaled. "A woman wrote me. Her name is Tasha Pierce. She runs a nonprofit in Ohio that tries to reconnect siblings separated by the system. She thinks she knew your mother. She says your mother stayed at a shelter she worked at years ago. She remembers a girl with a baby and a girl with pencil drawings of butterflies on everything." The knight inhaled. Nova's eyes glistened, quick and furious. "Don't," she said. "Don't say maybe." "I won't," he said softly. "I'll say this." Tasha sent a photo. He handed over his phone. A printout of a Polaroid scan, crooked. A teenager with tired shoulders and a braid. A toddler on her hip. Little girl in a sweater too big. Drawing on a napkin, at a metal table, crudely drawn butterflies. Wings uneven, defiant. Nova looked at it, and the sound she made was an animal discovering it can make more than one kind of noise. She handed the phone back like it was radioactive. "I remember that sweater," she said, voice thin. "It had a hole in the pocket. I lost a quarter. We can go see Tasha," he said. "If you want." She stared at the orchard like it would translate. After a while, she said, "Okay." They flew to Ohio. The plane was small and loud and had a coffee smell that never improved. Tasha met them in a brick building with flaking paint and posters on the walls that had been loved too hard. She was mid-40s, hair in a bun that had lost its fight, eyes that had seen things and become kinder from them. "You're taller than you were," Tasha said to Nova, and then laughed at herself. "Sorry, that's a dumb thing people say when they don't know which feeling to pick." "It's okay," Nova said. "I don't know either." Tasha made tea like an offering. She pulled out a box that looked like it held shoes but held time. "We keep what we can," she said, lifting notebooks, pictures, scraps. Records get lost. People get lost. But sometimes objects don't. She set a page on the table, and both Adrian and Nova lean in. It was a torn piece of a coloring book thin paper, crayon wax saturating. On the back, a scribble of handwriting, shaky but certain. "Jasmine, age 7, likes pink cereal and butterflies." Nova's chest made a sound. "That's her," Nova whispered. "Our mom wrote that," Tasha nodded. She came in with 2 girls, stayed 3 weeks. Then one night she was gone. Sometimes they didn't say goodbye because goodbye is a luxury. Do you know her name? Adrian asked, gently urgent. First name, yes, Tasha said. Lena. Last names changed too much to trust. But she reached deeper into the box and pulled out a small objective bead bracelet made from cheap plastic hearts. She left this, Tasha said. Said it was for a girl who needed to remember she was loved. I kept it because I don't know. I thought someday the person would walk back in. Nova took the bracelet like it could fracture. Plastic hearts were scratched, and one was cracked. She put it on. It slid over her wrist and sat like it had been waiting for a decade to return. She closed her eyes. They didn't find Lena that week, or the month after. Life didn't perm its hair for a neat third-act reunion. What they found was a trail knot, just one direction. But a map of people who had touched and been touched by a girl with a braid, and a dream that didn't have room to grow. It was enough to call hope by its name without lying. Back in Seattle, the foundation grew in the way gardens grow. Some sections run away lush, others struggling until someone replanted them in a different light. The art tent became an art building. The kitchen became a kitchen classroom, where Sophia enforced hygiene and joy with equal sternness. The orchard became a syllabus that taught weather and patience and how to suffer without calling it holy. The kids kept coming. The boy who asked if the garden could keep him and his sister together learned to graft branches with Adrian and watched a tree accept a new limb. Without rejecting its old self, a girl who whispered that daisies were for her mom planted 10 and came back. The next month to find 9 had failed and 1 had become itself. She cried. Jasmine drew the survivor daisy bigger than the rest and wrote underneath, "Sometimes one is a miracle," and it was enough. There were new battles. State budget threatened to cut after-school programs. The foundation became a lobbyist in jeans. A rumor that a volunteer had crossed a line turned into a procedural review that found nothing and taught everything the policy improved. The trust did, too. A neighbor sued over traffic. He brought brownies to the next lantern night, after a kid handed him a marigold and told him she was sorry. Her joy inconvenienced him. Dee blushed, crimson, and mowed his own lawn for the first time in 3 years. Adrian learned to speak less and listen more. He learned how to sit on the ground without wincing and how to move money like water, finding the lowest points in the landscape and filling them first. He fought calmly and then less calmly, with advisory boards about scalability, when what they meant was sanitizing. No. He said no to franchise offers and yes to partnerships that smelled like soil. For her 13th birthday, Nova wanted a party with precisely 0 speeches and exactly 1 dance battle. She got both no speeches because Reyes threatened anyone who tried. 1 dance battle because Elijah challenged Sophia and discovered that DNA is not required for swagger. Jasmine recorded the whole thing and added captions like "Dad Energy versus Chaos Gremlin." The internet obliged with love. On a winter afternoon, blue with cold, a letter came with no return address, just a post office in a town 2 states away. Inside, a piece of paper lined like a schoolchild's notebook, and a message in careful block letters. I saw the news, saw the girls. I am not good. I am trying to be better. I don't know if I'm brave enough to come back. I'm sorry I left. I thought I was saving you from me. I have a place now. It has a garden. The daisies die, and then they don't. That feels important. I'm writing this because a lady named Tasha told me to be braver than my fear. If you want to write back, there is a mailbox at the corner of 3rd and Willow. I will check it every Tuesday. Lena. The room changed temperature. Adrian's hand shook once, and then steadied. He looked at Nova. She was very still. Her face had all the expressions and none on it. It could be someone messing with us, she said, but her voice lifted at the end like it wanted to be wrong. It could, Reyes said, reading over their shoulders because boundaries at this point were made of love and poor habits. Or it could be a person who wants to become herself. They wrote back, not a flood. A letter measured like a recipe, Nova wrote most. Jasmine added a drawing of a daisy and a butterfly and a trio of girls holding hands. Sophia added a PS that said, I make a mean soup, because people deserve soup. They mailed it and waited. On the 3rd Tuesday, the mailbox answered. I am in Helena. That's in Montana. It is very big and very small. There is a thrift store with a coat that looks like mine from when you were little. I take the bus to work. I wash dishes in a place that closes too early. I think of you when the hot water fogs my glasses. It's like being in a cloud. I am not ready to see you. I'm sorry. I will try to be. Tell them I love them, even if I don't know how to do it right. Lena. Nova sat with the letter in the greenhouse, heat fogging the glass, little tomato plants trying hard. She read it 3 times. She put it under a stone on the potting table like it could absorb something good. When she came inside, she found Adrian in the study and handed it to him without words. He read it and nodded, because sometimes nodding is how grown-ups cry without leaking. They wrote again. The mailbox became a kind of spine in a story that refused to be a clean line. Some Tuesdays had letters. Some had only the weight of waiting. There's a discipline to hope. They were learning it. Years slid like seasons. The orchard became a place field trips measured their school year by. Jasmine's art appeared on a book cover at Gentle, fictionalized story about 3 girls in a lantern garden that made 4th graders write essays that made teachers cry in their cars. Sophia's cooking curriculum got adopted by 5 districts and 1 Navy ship, because the lieutenant saw a video and decided sailors also deserve better soup. Nova grew tall. She cut her hair short once and let it grow back just to know she could. She learned to drive, a process elegant as a 3-legged puppy at first, then smooth as breath. She spoke at graduations, not about triumph, but about ongoingness. She learned to say, "I Dan Tino" into microphones, and be applauded for honesty instead of answers. Adrian learned to sleep again, not always, but often enough to remember what rested bones feel like. He learned to love without bracing. In the quiet hour between the house going still and the foxes going loud, he wrote in Eleanor's journal until his hand cramped, and then he wrote anyway. On a new lantern night, maybe the 5th, maybe the 6th, the numbering stopped mattering. They released longer stories into the water with the lights. Kids had written on small slips of paper before tucking them into cups. "I told the truth," one read. "I learned to tie my shoes," read another. "I'm not a burden," read a third. The lanterns drifted, carrying sentences like seeds. After the crowd thinned, Nova stood by the pool, fingers cold. Adrian joined her, hands in pockets, posture easy in a way it had not been since he learned grief's shape. "She wrote again," Nova said. "She," Lena Nova said, and the name didn't break her. "She wants to come to the garden." He inhaled and let the air out slow. "Do you want that?" "I don't know," Nova said. "I think so." "Then we make a day for that," he said, "on your terms." She nodded. "On my terms." They picked a Tuesday because Tuesdays had become holy. The morning was bright without being cruel. The house smelled like bread because Mary had put a loaf in at dawn and put another in at 9 because comfort is better staggered. Lena arrived walking, no dramatic Uber, no taxi to the gate, just a woman on a road, coat folded over her arm, hair braided back like she kept trying and sometimes forgot. She held herself like a question in a pen. When she reached the arbor, she stopped and stared at the garden like a person who had been thirsty and found not a glass but a river. Nova walked to her. No one else moved. Not Adrian, not Reyes, not the girls behind the kitchen door. Faces at the glass, breaths making clouds in the outlines of their own lives. The orchard held very, very still. "Hi," Nova said. "Hi," Lena said. She bit a lip that looked like it had bled for less. "You," she stopped. "Look like you're drawing." "You look like the sweater," Nova said. And a laugh tore out of both of them, ridiculous and correct. They stood with an arm's length between them for a long time, then a half arm, then none. The hug wasn't cinematic. It was awkward, then adjusting, then real. It smelled like travel and greenhouse and 1,000 tears no one saw. Sophia approached cautiously with a tray like a peace offering. "Soup?" she asked. "I make a mean one." Lena took the bowl in both hands. "I could love you just for this," she said, eyes wet with something that wasn't just steam. Jasmine held up a sketch like a flag. "We saved you a tree," she said, "for planting." They planted it together. The soil was rich. Roots were shallow but ready. The ribbon they tied around it was not blue or gold, it was pink, the color of the shoelace bracelet that got burned and saved. After they sat under the old oak with mugs of tea, no one asked for a decided past. No one tried to drive a bulldozer through the present to reach a forgiving future. They let the day be itself. Halting, hopeful, half-finished by design. "I'm not good at this," Lena said. "Being the person I should have been." "Same," Nova said. "But I'm good at starting." Lena nodded. "Then we'll start. We'll keep starting." Years later, if you asked anyone where the story ended, they'd get sentimental and point at any number of lantern nights or harvest days or silly fights over who refilled the tea tin last Sophia, always Sophia. They might point to a courtroom verdict or a senator's handshake or a check with more zeros than an average person should have to think about. They would all be wrong, but in a way that contains its own tenderness. Because the story didn't end. It tilted. It curled around new things. It let other people walk in and add chapters without asking permission. The orchard kept making apples like that was its job, which it was. The garden kept teaching people to kneel without worshiping. The kitchen kept lending people a mouth when words failed. "Eat," it said, and then talk. One afternoon, gold, crisp, the kind that makes you forgive summers for leaving Adrian, stood with Eleanor. A journal open and a pen that had learned his hand, he wrote. "We once mistook survival for a destination. Turns out it's a road. The stops along it are soup and sketches and seedlings and the quiet bravery of showing up to Tuesdays. We are not healed. We are healing. We are not done. We are doing." He looked up. At the far end of the row, 3 girls, no, 3 young women walked arm in arm beneath branches heavy with fruit. Their laughter carried. Their shoulders touched. Their steps matched. He felt something inside him loosen with gratitude and never tighten again. "Dad," Sophia yelled, cupping her hands around her mouth like a megaphone. "You coming or what?" "I'm old," he called back. "You're vintage," she shouted. "Let's go," he went. Of course he did. They stood beneath the tree that had started as a stick and become a witness. They reached up and picked apples, not the low ones anyone could grab, but the ones just out of reach. The ones that require someone else to boost you by the waist or give you a shoulder or at least a dare. They bit into them, and the crunch sounded like 100 tiny, honest things. "Say it," Jasmine grinned, nudging Nova. Nova rolled her eyes and said it anyway, because families keep their rituals as if they're spells. "Plant compassion." "Grow justice," Sophia answered. "Harvest hope," Adrian finished. They clinked apples like glasses, took another bite, and let the juice run without apologizing. A breeze moved through the leaves. Somewhere nearby, a group of kids argued cheerfully about whether tomatoes were fruit. Reyes, off-duty, tossed a ball to a dog and pretended she was not texting a judge. Elijah configured a router and then inexplicably wept at a perfectly ripe peach. Mary yelled at no one in particular to get off the counter she had just wiped. Lena, sitting with a trowel and a patience she did not inherit, taught a child to press soil gently until it said, "Enough." The orchard exhaled. The lanterns waited. The water in the reflecting pool mirrored a sky that knew the names of the people who looked up at it. "Home," someone said. Maybe all of them. Maybe only the wind. And the story kept going, not because it needed bigger villains or louder victories, but because living is the longest, bravest plot twist anyone ever learns. The first snow of the season fell shyly, as if asking permission to exist. It powdered the orchard until each branch wore a line of chalk, until the lanterns looked sugared, till the world outside the kitchen windows pretended it had always been a postcard. Inside, the house ran warm on cinnamon and chatter. Mary had declared it a Bay Corby banished day, and no one was brave or foolish enough to test the consequences of banishment. Sophia ran point at the kitchen island like a 4-star general with a whisk. "Okay, team," she announced. "Today we master pie crust, soft pretzels, and humility." She glanced at Elijah, who raised both hands in a sign of surrender, and then added baking powder to something that did not require it. "Not humility like that," she sighed. "Real humility?" Jasmine sat on the window seat with a sketchbook balanced on her knees, drawing the world outside as if it were telling her a secret only she could hear. She shaded the slope of snow along the greenhouse roof, the way Mary's rosemary, wrapped in burlap, still gathered color under the frost. Lines flirted and then committed. Her pencil grinned through it all, Nova's laptop glowed at the far end of the table, emails blooming in a grid of responsibility. The Just Roots inbox had become a garden of its own seed orders, field trip requests, offers, complaints, confessions. A study in how many kinds of help a human can ask for without using the word, Nova answered, like she was handing out hot drinks to cold hands. We can host you, she typed. We see you. Yes, we have gloves for little hands. Yes, bring your whole class. We will make room, always. Adrian wandered in with the look men get when they've been on a phone call that did not include enough oxygen. He kissed Sophia's hair like it was a good luck charm, snagged a pretzel that had declared itself done, and leaned a hip against the counter. We've got a problem, he said softly, too soft, which made everyone look up. Reyes appeared a heartbeat later, snow on her shoulders, expression in that narrow band between storm and plan. Not panic, she said, seeing the room tense. Preparation. She put a map on the table and anchored the corners with flour canisters. Red lines cut through green counties like paper cuts. Drought, she said, followed by wind. Followed by people who weren't careful with fireworks or campfires or common sense. We're not in a burn right now. But if the wind shifts, the county will make decisions. One of those decisions could be a controlled burn near the ridge. Sophia's mouth dropped open. They'll burn our trees on purpose. Not your trees, Reyes said gently. But if they do it wrong, the line can jump. The orchard's old. Old carries memory. And she stopped, because she knows when a metaphor could become a eulogy. We have time, she said. We're going to do two things. First, we'll defensible space the edges. Clear brush, make the orchard interruptible. Second, we'll write plans. Evacuation plans. Water plans. Communication plans. Plans that turn panic into action. Gosh. Jasmine closed her sketchbook. We'll draw maps, she said. Signs so even scared people can follow them. Nova stood. We'll teach the kids, she said. Most of them know drills for school stuff we rather they didn't have to know. We'll add garden drills. We'll make it muscle memory. Adrian nodded, jaw tight, and I'll make calls, he said. Neighbors, council, the county. We'll get the right people to show up with the right trucks and the right humility. Humility is trending, Sophia murmured, and got a laugh the room needed. They pivoted the way families do when a new kind of weather arrives. The orchard crew gathered, gloves and clippers and rakes, bundled hats pulled down to eyebrows and shirts peeled off after the first hour because work warms you. They cleared the fence line, pruned ladders of deadwood, raked pine needles into damp piles. They staged hoses like cobras and filled tanks and left notes everywhere in a font that said, calmly, this way, please. The Just Roots kids loved the drama. They made badges that said Fire Squad in marker and wore them like superhero logos. They attended Nova S Garden Safety 101 with an attention usually reserved for gaming walkthroughs and cake. Jasmine painted wayfinding arrows on scrap wood, with steady hands, blues and greens, so soothing they could lower a heart rate. Sophia made a menu that could feed a small army out of one stove and a stern glare. At night they slept with the windows cracked, lungs tuned to the subtle change in air that meant smoke was practicing its multiplication tables. On the fourth night the wind turned. Morning came, and the light wore a shirt the color of ash. The county called. We're moving equipment to the ridgeline, a voice said. Administrative in the way people get when they are afraid of saying the wrong thing first. We'll stage at the high school. Be ready to evacuate if you get a notice. We'll be ready, Adrian said, calmly, because calm travels across phone lines faster than panic. Reyes rotated in a team of volunteers with experience from summers when everything burned. They walked the paths, paced distances, taught a language of perimeter that made sense to new mouths. If we have to go, Reyes said in the orchard, we go. If we have to stay, we do it on purpose. No heroes, no saviors, just neighbors who know how to carry. The evacuation alert buzzed at noon like a wasp. Level 2. Get set. The orchard went quiet for a heartbeat, and then louder as people moved in two directions at once, packing and preparing. Mary labeled boxes like she'd been studying for this exam for a decade. Elijah backed up servers so hard the cloud got jealous. Kids collected their memory maps from the art studio and tucked them into plastic sleeves, because paper is brave and fragile at the same time. Then the text none of them wanted. Level 3. Go now. They loaded quickly. The orchard looked at them in a way that made the back of Adrian's eyes sting. He put a hand on Stella S. bark and felt the deep cold of a tree's patience. We'll be back, he whispered. He hated that it sounded like a promise people say to each other at train stations. The drive to the high school crawled, and yet everyone arrived. They parked in a field that used to be a soccer game and opened trunks and tents and hearts. The gym became a city. The cafeteria became a plaza, just roots. Station improvised from folding tables and coolers became a kitchen that fed grief without asking its last name. News alerts pinged like a poor drummer. A plane flew low with a red belly and made a line of fire retardant on a ridge that had never looked like a dragon before and suddenly did. The fire changed directions as fires do when they read a different book. The county map updated. The red polygon crept toward the top left corner of Adrian's mind, where a map of the orchard lived. Dusk. A crew leader with the energy of a man 3 coffees past sanity came into the gym looking for the people with the orchard. He found them at a table where Sophia haggled and laughed and shoved soup into apathetic hands until they remembered they were attached to mouths. We've got a break, he told Adrian and Reyes. The line held, the winds shifting. We're lifting. Go on the west side. You'll be level 2 overnight. They exhaled collectively, a sound like a lung unzipping. They didn't go home. They ate sitting on an aluminum bleacher and made plans to sleep on the floor and tried not to flinch when the PA system said the words update and containment in the same sentence. Nova couldn't sleep. She sat against the cinder block wall, knees up, hands around them. Across the gym, a family huddled under donated blankets, a toddler in mismatched pajamas sucking their thumb like it was a spell. Lena slid down the wall beside Nova. I used to sleep in places like this, Lena said. Church basements, school gyms. I hated the lights. I loved the noise. Meant we weren't alone. I hate both, Nova said, and then laughed because it was true and also not. Shh. I didn't know belonging could be loud. Lena nodded, adding, belonging is the loudest thing I've ever learned. In the morning, smoke wearied itself into a dull gray, and the sky shook off yesterday's mistake. They were allowed home by noon. The orchard welcomed them with ash on leaves and a smell of something that tried and failed to get in. They watered the dirt like a thank you. They checked the fence line as if the wind had stolen posts, and some had indeed been offended into falling. They righted them one by one. That night they ate outside in coats, hands wrapped around mugs that knew the choreography. Reyes gave a speech she refused to call a speech. You did it right, she said. You moved, you stayed, you fed people, you let yourself be helped. That's the whole job. She raised a paper cup. The whole job. They toasted water, tea, a glass of something Mary called resilience punch that tasted like citrus and gratitude. Then the talking shifted to small things school essays. The unsinkable joy of a new playlist, a rumor that one of the Just Roots kids had developed a crush. So pure it produced poetry. Jasmine grinned and said she'd seen a haiku that used the word loam and almost cried from happiness. The orchard slept that night deeply and without noise. In the morning, everything wore a fine gray coat. The kids came early with rakes and masks. The day became a day of restoration. Gentle brushing of leaves, slow sweeping of paths, the kind of work that teaches patience like a hymn. In the midst of it all, an email arrived that had the audacity to be mundane and changed everything. Seattle Public Schools is piloting a land-based learning curriculum, it read. We would like just Roots to design the model. Adrian read it twice. Nova read it once, and then again out loud. Sophia screamed into a clean towel. Jasmine drew a small explosion on the corner of the printout and labeled it Joy. They built the model. It was not fancy. It was not corporate. It was not designed to be sold as a box at scale. It was sticky notes on a whiteboard, then rubrics written on top of those stickies like a country built over an old country. It included monthly garden days, art, cooking, science, soil tests, tree rings, neighborhood mapping, story circles, invited elders, quiet corners for kids who need to leave a crowd to be able to re-enter it. It included a ritual at the start and end of each session, where kids said something they noticed about the world that wasn't tea about them. It included a rule that messes are how we learn, and a corollary that cleaning is part of the lesson. They trained teachers, who arrived rigid with exhaustion and left with dirt under their nails and a sentence to try in their classrooms. What did you notice? They trained cafeteria staff, who arrived skeptical and left with basil plants in pockets like smuggled joy. They trained students to teach other students. They trained themselves to let parts of this go. By spring, Just Roots had sprouted in 3 more neighborhoods, not clone scoozins. One garden was behind a laundromat and had a reading nook made of old washing machine drums turned into chairs. One was on a church lot, half-raised beds and half-asphalt murals, the painted river of a city that forgot it had one. One was on a roof, windswept, full of plants that love sky, where kids took selfies with bees and did not run from the miracle. Cameras returned as cameras do, all teeth and questions. "What's the ROI?" someone asked Adrian, earnest face in a suit that didn't know how to bend. "Kids," he said, and smiled until the question learned it had answered itself. He was careful, did the thing he had learned to do. Moved the microphone sideways. He lifted Nova's voice, told producers to book Jasmine, asked Sophia to show them what soup can do to silence. He introed Mary and watched the internet fall in love with a woman who could fold you into a hug with a sentence. He put Reyes in the frame until Law looked like a person. He held Lena at the edges present, not paraded in. Learned pride can be quiet and still count. Summer arrived loud. The orchard's apples fattened shamelessly. The bees rehearsed like a string section. The foundation calendar criminalized free time. It included a lot of things that had never existed. The night of 10,000. Fireflies, which had 87 fireflies and 1,000 paper ones, and was still perfect. The soil prom. Kids wore brown and green and glitter. Jasmine painted a dance floor with vines. The soup-off Sophia's team beat a Michelin chef by a landslide, and the chef asked for her autograph for his daughter. They added one more tradition because life isn't life without extra rituals. The first bite. On a Saturday afternoon in July, the Orchard family gathered under Stella. Sanchez, the neighbor who used to complain about traffic and now arrived early to set up chairs, played a song on an old guitar. The girls stood with 3 apples from 3 different trees and said the words like a benediction that required teeth. "Plant compassion," Nova said. "Grow justice," Sophia said. "Harvest hope," Jasmine said. Adrian looked up through leaves into a sky that had learned its lesson. He thought of Eleanor and wrote an answer into the air. Then they bit. Crunches, like applause. On a Tuesday, because of course it was a Tuesday something, that they did not know where to put it first. It's an invitation to the White House. A ceremony for community partners in education and child welfare. He read it 3 times to make sure it was a prank from a clever teen with Photoshop and too much time. "Can I wear my apron?" Sophie asked, dead serious. "You can wear anything you want that does not have a stain," Mary said, then looked at the apron and relented because some stains are the whole point. They went. The building was not as cold as the Senate and not as warm as their kitchen. The event had the tone of a thing that knows it is important and is surprised by its own tenderness. They shook hands with people who make decisions for a living. Someone read a citation with their names in it and a sentence that made Adrian's chest feel like it was telling the truth out loud. When it was Nova's turn to step to the microphone, because apparently those were inevitable now, she said, "We just made a garden that told kids they weren't invisible." She paused. Turns out that's disruptive. Laughs in the nice room, even from the people who don't usually do that. After, they ate tiny desserts and watched important people try to figure out how to ask for recipes. Jasmine gave a senator's spouse a drawing of a butterfly. That was also a map of a city. Sophia taught a press secretary how to hold a knife. Reyes stood with a cup of water and watched the exits and smiled. The trip back was quiet. As coming home flights are, the girls leaned on each other. Lena sat across the aisle and held a photo of herself, young and tired, and smiled at the distance between then and now. Adrian stared out the window at the curve of the world and felt a click inside, not a door closing, not a chapter ending, but a hinge doing its job. They landed in a city that had learned its own tenderness. They drove home past blocks that had pockets of garden now, past kids with soil moons under nails, past a mural where someone had painted 3 hands holding each other instead of a flag. The orchard greeted them with evening and the low hum of creatures that had never read a citation and did not need to. Life returned to the mean rhythm of great days and ordinary ones, and a few that dropped you to your knees. That fall, a Just Roots kid named Dante lost his mother. The foundation did what it was built to do. Fed him, held him, made sure school stayed kind. Nova sat with him on the back steps and ate clementines, and said nothing for long enough for Dante to discover words on his own. When he did, they were soft, then hard, then water. She nodded at each one like a yes. Later, she wrote his name on a slip of paper and tucked it into a lantern and didn't let it float far from her. On a different week, a girl named Sita won a science fair with a project about soil pH and basil yields. She came to the garden waving a ribbon and shy as sunrise. Jasmine drew her holding the ribbon in a portrait that looked like an award and more like a mirror. On a Tuesday, too rainy to do anything dignified outside, Sophia taught 25 fourth graders how to make pasta with eggs and flour in confidence. One kid cried because their egg didn't want to be a team player. Sophia sat with them and whispered, "Failure is a flavor, okay?" into their hair until they laughed. On a night in winter, Rhea showed up at the door without texting first, which meant the thing in her chest needed to be named in a room that knew it. She took off her coat and stood in the kitchen with Mary and Lena and Adrian and said, "I'm retiring." The room made a sound like a laugh and a sob arm wrestling. "It's time," she said, and her voice didn't crack because cops learn how not to, and also because she was sure I want to teach. "You all taught me how." They threw her a party that had a cake with a badge made of sugar and a speech that wasn't Tia's speech. Adrian gave her Eleanor's pen. "You taught us to pull the right thread," he said, "not to carry bolt cutters when the thread doesn't work." She cried in a way that made the room pretend to look at the lanterns. There were weddings. Not theirs yet, but others. A volunteer named Marco married an ICU nurse named Alina under the oldest apple tree. And the wind decided to run soup across the lawn just as Mary's table declared mutiny. Everyone chased napkins and laughed and later told themselves the wind meant blessing. It did. There were funerals too. Mr. Kinley from down the road, the neighbor who brought the world's worst potato salad and the world's best stories. They planted a tree for him whose apples were late and sweet. Kids called it the story tree and left notes under it in jars. The orchard learned to hold joy and sorrow in adjacent pockets and never count the cost. On a morning when the sky hydrated properly and everyone's joints forgave them, the mail brought something surprising and right. A college acceptance letter with Nova S.'s name at the top. She had applied because Rhea stuck a finger in her chest and said, "Do not defer your life to hold up the rest of ours." She stood in the kitchen holding the open envelope like a newborn. Jasmine and Sophia screamed as if their own names were inside. Lena pressed her forehead to Nova's and whispered, "Baby, go make the world listen." She didn't want to leave the orchard. She also wanted to go. Both were true. The thing about choosing between homes is you don't. You learn to carry one inside the other. She chose a school that had a community garden and a teacher who said we more than I. Adrian bought a used station wagon because moving required a car shaped like a box. Mary packed 12 meals in containers labeled with instructions that were mostly a love letter. Jasmine slipped a sketchbook into Nova's bag with a first page that read, "Notice everything." Sophia took a Sharpie and wrote on the inside of the hood, "Plant compassion. Grow justice. Harvest hope." Reyes added underneath. Also, oil change every 5,000 miles. The day before Nova left. They walked the orchard like tourists and locals at the same time. She touched Stella. She hugged the greenhouse because if the girls could anthropomorphize soup, she could anthropomorphize glass. She stood by the reflecting pool and watched her reflection argue with the lanterns. Adrian stood beside her. "I keep thinking of small Nova," he said. Walking behind a car she had no business following. Now this Nova, walking into a future she built herself. "I didn't build it alone," she said. "I know," he said, "but you insisted." She smiled. "I did that." They drove south the next morning with the windows cracked to keep songs from feeling trapped. They arrived in a town that smelled like coffee and rain and thrift stores and possibility. They carried boxes up 3 flights of stairs to a dorm room that would eventually smell like a person and for now smelled like a broom. Nova hung a string of photos above her bed, lanterns and hands and a soup label Jasmine had lettered as a joke. She taped a map of the orchard behind the door where only she would see it. She hugged them all and told Adrian not to cry, and then absolutely cried herself. And then laughed, because the only way you survive a start is with two feelings at once. Back in Seattle, the house recalibrated. Absence felt like someone had turned down the volume on the favorite station, and you needed to lean closer to hear. They leaned. They FaceTimed in the evenings, Nova showing them the campus garden, a rectangle of green-defying parking lots. She told them about a professor who said, "We don't own land, it owns us until we earn it." And that sentence moved into Adrian's chest and refused to pay rent. The foundation grew in the direction of gentle. He started a fellowship for kids like Nova and Jasmine and Sophia, kids who could run toward burning things and not burn through themselves. They taught them how to rest with the urgency. They taught them to fold themselves back into the world after a victory, after a loss. They taught them to build committees out of people who don't agree and make the disagreement a feature, not a bug. They taught them to apologize without paperwork. Lena took a job at a school kitchen and made friends with a woman named Shanice, who taught her how to stand up for herself around men who were bad at hearing a quiet no. She took a GED class because a tutor at the shelter said, "You can," like a dare. She passed. She cried into a grocery store cake in the break room and saved the cake topper in a jar on the counter, because sometimes it's nice to read congrats and sugar at 10 p.m. Sophia started a podcast called Soup and Secrets, wherein people made her signature soups while telling harmless secrets. Favorite song to cry to. The worst haircut they ever got, the moment they realized a small thing that changed everything. It blew up because the internet had discovered that listening is content. It became a place where people learned to say "me too" without weaponizing it. Every third episode she ended with, "If you've got a real secret that hurts, we've got a real phone number to call," and read out the city's counseling line like it was a recipe. Jasmine published her first graphic novel the spring of her junior year. It was called The Lantern Garden, and it was not their story, but it was their story. It had a girl who walked into night because the day lied, a friend who chose to believe, a man who learned to be a father on purpose, and an orchard that stayed when everything else left. The book went into the hands of kids who needed a map that looked like art. Teachers read it out loud and cried the way grown-ups cry, privately and hard. Jasmine pretended not to read reviews, and absolutely did, and then taped the mean ones to the inside of a kitchen cabinet, where she could look at them and shake her head, and then feel nothing at all. Briggs got sentenced. The courtroom was both too small and bigger than everything. He wore a suit that did not make him a different kind of man. He spoke and tried to reshape the air with self-pity. The judge listened and then used words like aggravating and impact and life. He would not touch anyone's life again except in memory, which is where life is most dangerous and most salvageable. Celeste ran out of motions. The world forgot her on purpose and on accident at the same time. Years layered themselves like thin pages and thick. The orchard raised children and grown-ups and a dog named Kale, who came one day and did not leave and became the most beloved thief of tomatoes in county history. The lantern nights multiplied, and the pool found a new way to reflect every year. The apples turned into cider and sauce and poetry. The soup turned into a fundraiser and a feast and a hand you could hold with your tongue. One evening late, a man stood at the gate. He wore a coat that had lost a fight. He stared at the sign until it blurred. Adrian recognized him in the way men recognize the parts of themselves they wish they had never met. It was Sanchez's son, the neighbor's boy, who left angry and came back thinner, older, with eyes that had learned to lie and tell the truth. He said the sentence that is really 3 sentences. "I need help." They let him in. He stayed in the guest room, where heavy dreams go to get lighter. He ate soup. He slept 2 days. Then he joined a building crew that had a job downtown and learned again how to measure twice and cut once and show up, even when shame says stay home. He came back at Christmas with a pie and a girl named Tiff who laughed like permission. He cried when he saw the tree with his father's name. Nova graduated college. She did it in a cap that Jasmine had painted with vines. She did it into a sun that pretended rain didn't exist. She walked across a stage that was too small for the work she carried, but exactly the right size for her feet. She came home to a sign on the gate that read, "Welcome back. We kept your seat warm." She did not know where to put her arms because adulthood is all elbows. Everyone hugged her until her bones remembered their place. She didn't know what to do next. That's the part no one puts on the postcard. The months where you are a person without a title, where each day sits quietly and asks so. She tried on a few. Grant writer no, program director almost, teacher maybe later. Farmer she loved the dirt. The paperwork made her break out in hives. She ended up with a job description that was less a title and more a paragraph. Nova Vale, narrative and partnerships. She will tell the story and make sure it becomes true in more places. She did. She flew to St. Louis and Birmingham and Boise and smaller towns with names that taste like chewing gum. She sat with women who run kitchens that save lives, men who run after-school programs out of laundromats, kids who run, period. She listened, took notes, asked for nothing until asked, and then asked for everything. Tie your garden to your school, your church, your union, your queue at the barbershop. Make it hard to fail. Make it easy to love. Leave the door open, always. 10 years after the first lantern night, they held the 10th. The orchard looked like a cathedral trying to cosplay as a garden. Lanterns hung in tiers. The reflecting pool wore stars and a ribbon of color that made it look like a piece of sky that had wandered down to nap. People arrived early and lingered late. A little kid tried to catch a lantern, and someone older taught them the difference between holding and letting go. Adrian spoke because they made him. He kept it short. He planted something, he said, because he loves sentences that only work if you stand inside them. We were not sure it would grow. It did. It grows still. You did that. He raised his lantern. He didn't have to say the words. The crowd said them for him, loud and soft, a chorus that made a wind. They released. Lights rose. Hands rose. Eyes followed. The night held as many names as there were cups in the water. More. Always more. After, the 4 of them, 5 with Lena, 6 with Mary, 7 when Reyes wandered up, and pretended she hadn't been crying stood at the edge of the pool and watched the last lights find their circles. Nova leaned into his shoulder the way she had when her head was smaller and thought had farther to go. Remember the first night? I remember not knowing if anything would ever be okay, he said. I remember you coming out of the hedge like a plot twist. I remember soup. Soup is eternal, Sophia said, mouth full of cookie. Drawn, Jasmine said, the pencil already in her hand. Filed, Reyes added, dry as dusk. Gosh, labeled and stacked neatly, Mary said, because, of course. Planted, Lena whispered, looking at the tree they planted the day she came back. Home, Adrian finished. They stood there a while longer. The lanterns winked out one by one, which is how they work. The point is not to burn forever, but to be beautiful while they can and make room for the next light. The orchard breathed the way old things breathe. The sky remembered their names and did not show off about it. When the last light kissed the water goodbye, they walked back up the path. Bodies older, hearts younger, hands linked in a geometry that had become muscle memory. The door opened. The house was warm. Soup simmered. A new stack of paper plates waited to be turned into fish by children with scissors. Tomorrow would bring emails and budgets and weather and a car that needs a new alternator and a kid who needs someone to look them in the eye and say, I believe you. They knew the work. They knew the joy. They knew how to hold both. And the story kept going because that's what stories like this do. They do not end. They become a place other people can walk into. They become a garden and a kitchen and a lantern. They become a family on purpose. They become a promise kept and kept